Are you cold?
Okay, we're reconvening as the Wicomico County Legislative Session 2019-19, September 17th, 2019. The next item on the agenda is where are we? Procedure for filling a vacancy on the Board of Education. If the meeting's going long and council would rather review this at another meeting, we certainly could do that.
I think that'd be a good idea.
All right.
Although we have a kind of a time deadline, though, I think, don't we, to get this to the General Assembly? Laura?
We do. We have to submit the language that we intend to present by November the 1st.
And I think we can do this quickly, too, because
All right.
it's more or less a reiteration of the last meeting.
All right.
And I can just,
Go ahead.
if you don't have any questions about what I've put in my memorandum, I can just go on and quickly go down it. Number one, of course, is to terminate the recommendation procedure. That would be the nominating commission, to just do away with the commission, and essentially the council would just make appoint the vacancy under its own procedures.
I hate to ask a question, the very first one, but did we actually said we wanted to totally do away with the commission?
Well, the only thing they do is make recommendations. That's their only function, so if you're not going to use them for recommendations, there's no point in having a commission.
Do we have any minutes or notes or who the members are of this commission? Do you know?
I don't.
Because I looked online, I didn't see them.
I have the resolutions appointing the members of the commissions, but we don't have their minutes.
So it's kind of, it was hard to judge
What
if
they
this
did.
is a useful commission or not when we don't.
Well, I'll tell you one
know what
thing,
they've
it's
done.
hardly any, there's very limited turnout of the members who have been appointed. They had a lot of trouble getting a quorum.
So then maybe they need to look at new members.
Yeah.
We made it very diverse, and it's like 14 to 20. We were trying to get people in business, people in representing all facets of the community.
Somebody from Fruit Women.
And I think it was an overkill. I really do.
Yeah, I think there are only three counties left in the state that have a nominating commission. Anne Arundel County had one, but they've done away with it just within the last, in fact, it goes out of effect next year.
And the fact that the appointment is really only on a temporary basis, I don't think we had to go as far as we did before. There he is. Hey, Mr. Brumman, come on up here.
Yeah. So, if council's okay with that, I'll go on to point two.
Well, Mr. Brumley just walked in. Mr.
Oh,
Brumley,
okay.
the first item on the agenda was looking at possibly terminating the recommendation procedure and the Wicomico County School Board nominating commission. So we're looking at changing it from a commission appointment process, Mr. Taylor, to, I believe, a council appointment process. And I've shared with the council some of your concerns over the last couple of years, whereas it was difficult to get a quorum and other things to that nature. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I know that you never recommended getting rid of the commission at all. It's never even had a discussion, but I'm just filling you in on what has just transpired in the last 5 minutes here. Okay? And we're not making any decisions. It's a work session. Any input you have, we'd appreciate it.
No matter who
Use the mic.
decides, no matter who decides how the commission's going to be made up, there needs to be a process of if people don't show up, if people don't attend, that they can be eliminated and other people to replace them. And the two,
You need to talk closer
You have
to
to
the
speak
mic.
right into that mic.
Oh,
And
sorry.
also, could you state your name and what your position is?
my name is Ben Brumling, and I was the county council PTA president. There's no more county council PTAs.
But you're the chairperson.
But I'm the chairperson for the nominating committee.
Okay.
And we've met on 2 different occasions since this committee was put together. We've had, there was, I think, 14 people on the committee. 2 of them from different locations only attended the very first meeting we ever had, and 1 of them has never attended a meeting at all. They were representing different townships in the area. And because of that, that did make a problem with quorum sometimes. And you understand that people have, sickness, everything else coming up, but there ought to be, and my suggestion would be, from being a member of the Maryland PTA Board of Directors, What we did was, in that case, the president or the chair, to excuse people. They let them know what the issue is, why they can't attend, and if it's unexcused, then to have however many you want to come up with, 2, 3, shouldn't be over 3 meetings, then they are replaced by somebody who wants to attend the meetings.
Okay, appreciate that. Mr. Chair, go ahead and continue.
Well, I think the first thing to decide is, do you want to do away with the commission or not? And I think the rigmarole or the difficulties that have just been expounded essentially sort of support doing away with it. I mean, if you're going to have...
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
I asked the question
Yeah.
when you read it, but given all that,
I mean, right now, for example...
simpler is
yeah,
better.
Yeah.
So
And
by no means is it a simple,
when he was coming in, I was explaining, I think there were only, I think we're one of 3 counties that are now left that have a nominating commission to fill vacancies. The 4th, Anne Arundel County, still has it, but under legislation that was passed a year or so ago in the General Assembly, that commission ends next year. That'll be the end of it. So we'll be down to 3, 2 including us, or 2 others besides us. And I think that probably the difficulties that you've described are why that's happening, or why counties are abandoning that method.
You know, in the Charter Review Committee and the redistricting committee, the council chose the members of those committees. Each council person chose 1 or 2. So that's the way those 2 committees have been handled in the past, from my experience. So there's just some history
Yeah.
there. If, you know, as we move forward, that's the way they were handled. So.
Yeah, I mean, that might be, I'm just saying that in terms of Board of Ed vacancies, there are only 3 counties that use nominating commissions. In the other, the appointing authority, be it the council, the governor, in some cases, the Board of Ed fills the vacancies. But whoever it is, they just do it directly without any nominations, except in 3
What
counties.
would the outreach process be?
Well, it's up to them. I mean, they can do it whatever procedure they want to use.
What if the nominating process were changed to just the council? What would our outreach process be?
Well, that would be up to the council. I mean, they could...
Council member walks in and says, hey, I like John Smith, he's a good guy, put him on the list?
Well, I mean, you could adopt a set of rules and procedures for that. I mean, normally, I would think you would say somebody leaves, dies, whatever. At the next meeting, you'd say, submit applications by so-and-so, and then proceed that way. Or if you want to, you could have a very formal procedure, you know, submit your application and 3 letters of recommendation. However, I mean, it would be up to the body.
You know, you get into a situation when we have districts, and we have district Board of Ed members, right? And you have district council people. So, you know, would it be left up to the district council person to appoint somebody out of that district, or 2 people, or? It's not gonna be as simple as it sounds, I guess, is what I'm saying.
No way.
Well, it can be as simple or as complex as you want to make it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you
We're
know.
looking for guidance as far as what examples are out there.
Well, I can tell you this, at least in the state code, there are no examples of procedures that I can recall. And I think the reason for that is that you don't want to tie yourself down to a procedure in the state code that if you want to change it, you've got to go back to the General Assembly.
Right,
You just pass a resolution.
I understand,
you
but
know,
maybe it's, Mrs. Hurley, maybe it's going to be a responsibility to try to talk to the other counties that are doing it a little bit differently and ask them how they go through their process, right?
Okay.
Because it's going to be more than just what we have to turn into the state.
well, also, if we eliminate the commission, but the other language associated with that, they have to submit in a certain number of days, they gotta get in their applications, and all that would still be there, or should still be there.
Well, I think it would be up to this body to pass a resolution for that. I mean, that's what I'd recommend, to do it by resolution,
The one
rather
hiccup
than having anything cast in stone in the state code, because it's so hard to change.
I
And
agree
we
with
can
you
check with the
100%,
other counties
Bob.
on that.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%.
I was just saying, we can check with the other counties on that to see if
Okay.
they have a separate policy.
And the other thing too is that I know the hiccup that we came across was, you know, in the first having to go back through the process of what are we going to do? Are we going to do more public hearings again? Because I think it was 2 public hearings were required. And then you were saying, well, John, what am I going to do? You're going to do 2 public hearings all over again? Before we knew it, we had a convoluted mess that was going to go on for another 6 months.
I will add this
That
part
wasn't
to
the
it.
procedure. Ugh,
Brumley, what were your thoughts?
remind me.
Before you start thinking about doing away with a commission that's already set up, let me tell you, the first time we went through this, John and I spent quite many hours on the phone and calling other people to find out, because there was so many questions that needed answers that weren't answered in the beginning. Right now, we have most of those questions answered, of the procedures that we had to follow, that were not only legal, but meant to make everyone happy. To just appoint a committee at a drop of a hat if someone, as we had in the past, passed away and we had to reconvene, to have people to have to start this process all over that don't know what the history is, what they need to do, I think it will be detrimental to the process. We have a few issues that if you're going to keep it, that you need to address, and I contacted some of the other committee members and made sure that I was going to bring forth to you guys what those procedures need to be, to look for you guys to look at. But to do away with a standing body, I think would be a detrimental to the process and to the council, because it is a lengthy process you have to go through. It's not just a fly-by-night, and like you say, you have to have the applications, you have to have 2 public hearings, and then you have to turn it in, to you guys, and that really, it takes time, and you've got to know something about what you're doing, and answer the questions. Has to be really somebody that has some knowledge of the Board of Education to be able to navigate through the process.
Larry?
Yeah, the biggest problem that we're going to face, regardless of what we decide, is inexperience, what you just said, the knowledge. But the biggest problem is we're not going to see a high turnover in board members. I think Dr. Hanlon stated this morning that her time at Washington County, she never saw a change in board members. We had an unfortunate death a couple months ago, and that's why we had to do what we did. But it's going to be difficult to keep that committee going, or that commission going, without regular meetings and keeping everybody apprised with what's going on and the future process.
Then would it be better, instead of having a committee, is to have just one person like yourself that we could turn to, that would go through, in other words, we come up with the names, if we want to get rid of it. I'm not advocating we get rid of the committee right now, But a thought would be, okay, we've got a vacancy on the board, let's turn to Ben Brumley, or let's turn to somebody else that's been active in the school system that would know the situation, and we come up with the names and let this person, yourself, work with these people to explain what the ins and outs are and what they need to do as far as ethics filings and things like that, and make sure they're registered voters. Would something like that be something to work with?
I would assume that would be all right, but
Not that the pay's that great. I think that's your problem, getting people.
to have one person, I don't know that's, you're giving one person a lot of, not authority, but a lot of pressure on that one person to, to know everything that needs to. This commission was made up by, there was a few teachers on the commission. There was,
Parent of a special needs child.
yeah, we had different areas that, well, the parent of the special, that was there for special education never came, or they did, only came to
Then
one
you
meeting.
didn't, when you needed it.
Yeah, so, but we had a good, of businessmen in the community, we had a past board member on the committee. I think the committee was good.
Diverse.
Pardon me?
It was very diverse.
Yeah, and every township was represented, as long as the ones that had a council or a commission of that town. I think the only 2 that you could say weren't, that have names is Walson Switch and Parsonsburg didn't have anybody, but everybody else in the county had somebody to represent.
My district
and
liked
different.
the representative.
and different organizations that came together to have some say about who was going to be the next board member.
Josh?
I would say it's a good opportunity maybe for us to, if, more bodies are switching over to ranked choice voting, where you could, in this case, if we did have a commission and they did come up with, say, 3 to 5 recommendations, you could then rank them and they'd have a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can do it a couple different ways, but 5 points, 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, whatever it is, if you had enough people. But then instead of if somebody drops out or somebody else moves aside, the individual who is the next highest ranked would then just go in. It might make it easier. And that's a larger trend that's happening in a lot of other across the country. But ranked choice voting
That's
is not a bad
way to do it.
How many districts are there? 5. Maybe if you had somebody from each district, and then you wouldn't really need the 2 at large, the 5 districts, so you'd have the whole county represented, and you'd cut down on the amount of people, you'd count on them down on the amount of people you need for quorum, and hopefully you'd have people that really want to serve if they're serving in their commission, in their district. A couple of the issues that we came up with, one is it's not listed that they have to be 21 years old and they have to be a registered voter. The Maryland State Board of Education says you have to be 21 years old to be on the board. We didn't have that in the bill. The first time around, we had a student that was 18 years old, was a registered voter, and they applied, and they would have been a good candidate, but they weren't 21. So that needs to be stated. Another issue is that we came up with, and I guess this would have to go through the legislature, but a staggering board instead of everybody being voted on the same year, because then it could be a lot of problems. You got all new people on the board, nobody knows what's going on. Yes, there's a transition
Same thing with the
period,
council.
but I think that would be a very wise way to go, no matter whether you keep the commission or you don't, but to add that into. The other thing is, if you keep the commission, and if you turn it back to or don't keep the commission and you turn it back to the council, you wouldn't have this issue. We didn't have a budget. Trying to get people to advertise, TVs, newspapers, magazines, whatever. People didn't really want to talk to us a lot about it because we weren't talking dollars and cents.
The other thing you really need to stress in the future, if there is a future, is this ethics forms they have to fill out.
Yes.
I mean, I talked to somebody yesterday that was on a board in Wicomico, well, it's a state board, but it's a Wicomico County board, that resigned because of the lengthy process, well, of all the information the state needed to know. And I'm
Right.
sure that's the same way with,
Well, that's not going to, I mean, that's not going to come into play with what we're doing.
No.
That's state mandated.
no, but what I'm saying, they need to know it, that would cut
Right.
down.
Know it
I mean,
ahead
you're
of
gonna
time.
at the point you think, well, this guy's gonna be great, or girl, or whatever. You get to the point, oh, I gotta do all this? No, I'm not doing all that. You know.
Well, the first time around, when we presented 3 names before the actual election to make it a voted board, the Board of Education gave us the ethics policy that the state had come up with, and we made that a part of the application packet. And this last time, that went out with the application. But the budget was that was the issue. The first time, we didn't have as much trouble getting somebody or getting the different advertising agencies to cooperate with us. This last time, we had major problems with it. They didn't say it was a money issue, but they didn't advertise for us either.
That's going to come down to a matter of whether the council funds it or whether the Board of Education funds it. So we're going to have to consider that. Mr. Taylor?
Well, I mean, to me, it sounds like you're trading simplicity for making something that's already complex, a lot more complex. But that's just one person's opinion. I mean, you have members that are appointed by the municipalities. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do that on a staggering basis.
Well, I think
I mean, it's,
Mr.
you know.
Brumley, I like his suggestion that maybe we have 5 members, 1 from each district, and we cut down that list of 14.
That would be another way to do it, certainly, yeah.
Or the staggered terms are normally the end date, not the start date.
Yeah, these are just temporary appointments anyway.
Right.
But
It's
he
not
was-
like
he
it's
just
4
brought
years.
that up.
Was a 4-year
No,
appointment?
to finish a term.
It's just to finish a term.
Oh, well, that's to be determined by somebody other than us. We didn't do that.
Right, right.
Well, it's up to you, but I mean, that's the way I see it. I mean, you have the simple way of doing it, which is just to end the commission, or you can vary it around, but I don't think you're going to be
Well,
able
to end the
to.
commission, we'd have to get back to a whole set of processes on how the council's going to go ahead and
Well, you just have it put through the General Assembly, and that would be the end of it, just like Anne Arundel County did a couple of years ago.
Right. I think we're going to need some more
Yeah.
recommendations or more suggestions from the other counties as to what they're doing to get a feel for what we would have to anticipate. I agree that
Yeah.
it could be a simpler process. I'd just like to know what we plan to get into and how we're going to do it. Right?
I mean, all I can tell you is what's in the state law. I mean, unless you want me to, maybe Laura could call up the different
Yeah, I
counties.
can, contact some other counties to see how they handle theirs.
But we do have,
We are on
if
time
we want to get
schedule.
it in the legislature, it's not absolutely necessary. November 1's not a hard deadline, but it's a significant deadline in terms of getting the legislation through. So that's something to be kept in mind.
Any other points you wanted to make?
Well, yeah, just going on down the list, number 2 had to do with, to provide that a vacancy appointment is for the full remaining term, regardless of when the vacancy occurs, and that is to avoid appointment for only part of the remaining term. The appointment that you all made in, what was it, June, I think, of this year, a couple months ago, that lady is going to have to run again in next year's election to fill out the final 2 years of the 4-year term.
Right.
And then run again.
And if, yeah, so if you want to do away with that, under item 2 in my memo, I've got the changes that would be made.
Okay.
Now, that's, of course, separate from where you're going to have the commission.
Right.
So, I mean, that would be an item. If you want to proceed on that, we can draft language for that. Any discussion? We need sort of where we're going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought, they should serve out a term.
Right.
Same thing, and same with our county council.
That's exactly right. I
I
was
mean,
going to say the
I
same.
think it should mirror it as well, right? If you're appointed to fill a term. In fact, the language is kind of contradictory when you read it, because it kind of says they're appointed to fill the term.
But they're
And
not.
It says until the next general election.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I really think, I don't know, I wasn't there when it was originally written, but I almost feel like maybe it was meant, maybe they were thinking the next,
It was meant for the short term. It was
Yeah.
meant for the short term. Mark specifically had concerns with the fact that that person wasn't elected by that particular district or by the constituents, so that they should not have the privilege of the entire 4 years, because you may have someone in that was appointed and not elected, and they're going to be representing that district for
but that
3
happens-
years, so.
but unfortunately, that happens all the time with
Yeah.
vacancy. 'Cause you
But that
have
was,
someone-
that was what the thought was behind
But
it.
the problem behind that is it causes an election that's not in the cycle of,
I don't have a problem going
Yeah.
to the 4 years.
right.
Yeah, and I will tell you that almost all of the counties, it's for the full term.
Sure.
There are a handful where it's for, like ours
Yeah.
is now.
Right.
So if you're agreeable on that one, then,
I think that
I
might
think
be-
full term
Yeah.
sounds fine.
So if we do it for the board member, we should do it for the council member.
Stay on one subject at a
But that would
time.
be,
yeah, that would have to be done, of course,
Keep that on our
by
radar.
charter amendment.
Right,
That
that's-
would be charter amendment.
Don't want to
yeah.
discuss it now, but keep
Right.
that.
Point number 3, to provide for appointment of a member if there is no candidate running for election or elected from a designated district, or less than 2 candidates are running for the at-large seats. So that would handle that. We talked about that last time. I thought everybody was in favor of that, and we
Less
have
than 2
language
Are they saying that there's less than 2 candidates that we
for
would?
the at large.
for the at-large.
Oh, gotcha, sorry.
Yeah.
Mistake. Okay.
So if everybody's all right on that one. Number 4 is an optional item, and this would be to allow for a vacancy that occurs near the end of a term. And I guess if we're going to change to the full 4-year term, it would be the end of that 4-year period, to remain unfulfilled if the vacancy occurs within a very short period of time before then.
Right. What was that window?
But we need to define that short period of time.
That's right. If you want to do that, I think we need to put some probably it would be months, I assume, rather than years, some period of time in which it can remain unfulfilled. 3 months, 6 months, what have you.
I think we mentioned 9 months last time.
9 months, I mean, that's,
I think we mentioned, yeah, possibly 9 months, because you have to, if you're gonna be a candidate, you have to submit, what's it, end of January,
It was
first of
the end of
February?
January, right?
yeah.
So you would know, so if something happened in, say, March, prior to a November election, yeah, it wouldn't seem to make sense to appoint somebody when there's already candidates kind of running for that seat. So the question is, like 6 months, 9 months, probably something in that kind of window.
Well, just, and I also have an optional item that unless requested to do so by the county board. So in other words, if they felt they needed to have that vacancy filled, they could then ask that it be filled. So I think with that second optional item, you could extend, the 9 months would be more reasonable with that, to me.
That could work, 9
yeah.
months could work.
So if you're happy with the 9 months, we'll just put that in, you know.
Okay.
My only concern with the 9 months is that District 2 does not like to go unrepresented in anything.
You can say that about all districts.
They're very vocal about it.
Well, you're also looking at, you're looking at least a 2-month process almost, or at least a month and a half for the commission to do its job. Time you get, you allow a couple weeks for the applicants to put people to put an application in, and then time you vent those applications and have 2 public hearings, even if you had them a week apart.
That's a lengthy process.
So
Okay.
it takes, you got to figure at least 2 months for the process to go through, whether you have a commission set up or you set it up the way it's stated in the law that you have to do. It's,
Okay. Makes sense.
So are we okay then with the 9 months, and the board could come in and ask that it be filled? If they feel that it needs to be filled in that period,
Yeah, I believe so.
I think for
I
the,
think that'll work.
yeah.
I don't know, you're limiting down to a board that is even. There's not an odd for votes. And I know in the past, when there was a lapse in the time replacing a board member, that has made an issue with decisions being made on the board. I think that's something that you have to consider. 6 months maybe, but I don't know if 9 months would be too long.
Well, they would have the right to come in during, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, the board could come in and say, we'd like to have that filled.
right, we can still fill,
Yeah,
I mean, we can
yeah.
write it so that it can still
Yeah.
be filled
Yeah.
if elected to, but with the option
Yeah.
would exist not to do it. So that could be a discussion at that point in time, whether, you know, it should be filled or not, but for
Yeah.
that period, doesn't mean we have to.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be worded, so we have to do it, correct?
Yeah. Well, I actually had it in mind that if the board wanted it filled, that they could ask you all to do it, and you'd have to do it.
Yeah, I could live with that. I mean, because
Yeah.
I think 9 months is a long time. I really do. I think it's a very long time. And as Nicole said, there are people who don't want to not have representation. This council was with 6 members for 3 months, and it was a
Now,
nightmare.
I would say this, that I mean, I think that the board would have to make that request within some period before the end of the term, because like the gentleman just said, it's going to take a couple months, if you keep the commission, just to get the names before the council. And then it's going to take another 2 weeks or a month probably to make you all make your decision. So you're probably
about 3
talking
months,
3
yeah.
months anyway.
So you're, yes,
I was gonna say, so if that's the case, can we just have, instead of going through the whole nomination process and it's only 6 months, can we just say this person, like, that district council representative also has to serve on the school board until that time is up?
That'd be a conflict of interest.
No conflict?
That'd be
Or can we have like Mr. Rumley say,
that would be a conflict.
Yeah, it would.
I'm like, can we just assign somebody for that time?
You could take and ask if, and I don't know the legal aspect of this, but to have like an alternate for the board, if there was an extra person at large, now, like I say, I'm just talking off the cuff right here, that had no voting rights on the board, that maybe went to the meetings, but if there was a case of vacancy, that they could step up. And then if they were an alternate to the board, they would already know the process, they would know the issues before the board, and therefore, they could step in and not have to spend several weeks in training and being
That
set
opens
up.
a whole lot of can of worms,
Well, I'm just saying,
You're gonna
I just-
pay 'em,
that's-
not gonna pay 'em, that's a
It
five.
does.
4-year
Well, the pay is
commitment,
not that much, so it's not about, I don't think the
but
pay
still,
is a
that's
big
lot
deal.
to-
It's a good thought, but I'm concerned
How
that
you
that
gonna
person
select
may
that
not live in
person?
the exact district that may need to be replaced. They
Right.
may be an
Yeah.
alternate, but
Yeah,
they may
there's
not live in
all
that
kinds.
district,
variables.
right?
Right.
Well, are we all right with then the 9 months with the 3 months deadline? Where
6
the-
months, I'd rather do 6 months and then, unless they come to us before then.
I'm okay with 6 months.
Okay, we'll prepare something along those lines.
Still up
The
for
last
discussion.
item, numbered item 5, another optional item would be to prohibit appointment of someone who's running for election and opposed by another candidate or other candidates. This was something I think Mr. Holloway mentioned at the last meeting. In other words, if you get down to the end of the term, as Mr. McCain pointed out, you're going to have, people will file for the next term, and the idea would be you can't appoint somebody who's running, who's opposed. Now, if they're not opposed, then there would be no reason to not appoint them.
Yeah, I see some challenges.
So you're not essentially influencing the election.
Yeah,
That's the
but
idea.
unfortunately, but then you're also penalizing someone because they filed before the vacancy even, they had no control over that. The vacancy occurs and they've already filed the run. Now all of a sudden you're saying, yeah, well, you can't be appointed and they might be a great candidate.
Well, it
He's
would
saying
only,
if they're
yeah.
contested, Bill. He's saying if they're contested.
yeah, it would only, yeah,
Right.
let me
I
read the
understand that,
language.
but I'm still saying,
Well, that brings
whether
a good-
there's two great candidates
Yeah.
regardless.
That brings up a good point. Should we not make any appointments during the final election cycle?
Well, then that's going to be, you're going to be getting back to 9 months, we just talked about. Let me read the language that I have for that, and I think that may cover what Mr. McCain's concerned about. It would just read, "A person who has filed to run for a seat in the next term may not be appointed unless after the time by which candidates must file in order to be elected, he or she is unopposed." That's the big thing. In other words, it would only
Right.
be after the filing deadline. Or in the case of an at-large seat, only one other person has filed to run for those seats. So that would, in other words, the idea would be to not influence the election after we know, after the filing deadline. So if you're running and you got an opponent, you can't be appointed. That's
So
the
the
long
person-
and short of it.
So the person that we do appoint is guaranteed that they're going to be history in 6 to 8 months.
Right.
They will not have any say whatsoever.
That's right,
in education.
that's right. And the idea is to not influence the election for the next term.
So how quality
Yeah.
is that to appoint somebody, something as complex and complicated as school board, and we're gonna appoint you for 3 months?
And do they really want that position?
I'd say no appointments within the last election cycle.
All right.
Tough break.
That kind of gets back to the whole statement earlier about not
Right.
appointing somebody,
Yeah.
which gets that last, like I said, that last election cycle.
Right.
If you're in the cycle,
That's a good point.
the cycle's in process. Appointing somebody when you're in that process is just fraught with a lot of potential, just like something like this. This would, I just don't see the logic behind appointing somebody that would go through that whole process and then get appointed for 90 days. And, I'm sure, it takes 2 years to figure out what you're doing going to school board. It's complicated. It's a lot to learn.
But if you had your commission already or some type of commission, whether you appoint, who appoints, but you had a commission set up, if you had two candidates from a district and they went before the commission, I don't think the public would say as much that it was, trying to influence an election as it would be if the council was to actually appoint somebody. That would be the
Yeah, I
way
agree.
I would look
Yeah.
at it
Right.
as a voter and a taxpayer. That if you already had this group of people, a member from each district already in place, and you put the names before them, whether And as long as you allow both people, or if it's 2 or 4 or how many, to apply for the temporary position, then you wouldn't, I don't think the voters would take it as much as it was trying to be influenced.
I'd be very upset if I were a candidate and I was told that I could not run for office because the committee or a council was going to appoint either me or my opponent to office for the next 4 years.
So
No, I
think
don't mean for
five's a
4
no.
years, I'm talking about for to finish it out, the 3 months or whatever, is what I was
But
talking
still,
about.
that would give someone
Okay,
a
then don't
bit
wanna
of
have that.
favor as an incumbent. It would give that,
For a variety
that
of reasons,
person.
Okay.
but-
The commission, we didn't look at whether you were an incumbent or not, we looked at whether, you were the
no,
best
no,
candidate
I
for the
mean, that would
position.
give that individual a lot of privileges when they came time to actually get elected.
So is 5 a go or a no?
I think it's a no.
I think it's a no, too.
Okay.
We're going to switch back and forth quite a lot. That's a work session. I
This is gonna come
think
back
so.
to us again anyhow with blanks filled in.
Well, yeah, and
I think it's a no.
And as I said earlier, though, we got to keep moving on this if we want to meet the, what I
Understand
call
that.
the reasonable filing deadline
what
in
do you-
Annapolis.
What do you-
Yeah, no, no strong feelings. We can file, I mean, you can file till July, or January 13th. There's not gonna be a major issue, and they might request that, but, as far as this bill itself, I don't think it's, something like school board, I don't think really is that contentious when it comes to, at least in the last point, when it comes to running for office and they're giving anyone an advantage. I don't think that's gonna be a major, but maybe for council, it might be a little bit
So
different.
appointments would not be made during the election cycle.
Well, I would say that if there was only one person running for that seat, why not appoint that person?
And that's the way I have it written, essentially, that if the person is unopposed,
Right.
that they
Appoint
can,
that
he or
person.
she could be appointed.
So
Yeah.
there would be no appointment process if there were 2 running, but if there's only one, the appointment process could
The
continue.
only time that they would be barred from being appointed would be if they're two,
Gotcha.
if you have an opponent.
Looks good.
Right.
See, so if there's only one, now I'm talking about the district seats. Now,
Right.
the at-large is a little bit different, there'd have to be 3 people running. So that would be that's 5 again. So are we a
I'm
go
good
on
with
5 then? Okay, so we've gone from no to go on 5,
yeah.
I just want to make sure. Yeah, okay.
I think.
The
I'll
other,
say no when you bring it next time, but go ahead.
The other thing, I just throw it out, we didn't mention it at the last meeting, but at least some counties have a provision along the lines of the appointing authority is not required to conduct discussions of the applicants or make the final decision at an open meeting. I'm not 100% certain whether that is okay under the Open Meetings Act, but I think that it is. Would you all want to consider something like that?
Say that again?
In other words, I'll read the language again. The appointing authority, be that council, whoever, is not required to conduct discussions of the applicants or make the final selection at an open meeting.
And for clarification, he's thinking that it may not fall under open meetings because it's personnel related.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So
Yeah.
we could make a decision in closed session as to who we wanted to nominate, or the commission could make that decision in closed session.
And you could also conduct your discussions that way with the
that's legal.
candidates.
How do
If
we
it's-
do it with the county council? I mean,
Well, we would do the same thing. We do it in closed session, then the final vote would be in open session.
okay.
I'm okay with that. I'm amazed that that's in there. Yeah,
Would
that's
you want
fine.
that optional, so that you can have the option to do it?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll stick something in then. Of course,
Okay.
it would have to provide that it complies with open meetings.
I understand.
Because
I
the
know.
Open Meetings Act could change in the future,
Right.
even if it doesn't apply now.
I got you.
So,
There may be some personal information that probably shouldn't be broadcast on.
The other
Type
thing
14.
is, what was the real hiccup with the process of so many public hearings where, was there a first appointment that wasn't accepted or something? I'm getting a little confused on what happened.
The first process went very smoothly. We had the 2 public hearings, we had to give the council 6 members, or 6 names, and then it was your choice between the 6. That went very smoothly. The second time was when there was an issue, when a candidate wanted to come in at the 11th hour and submit their name, because they claimed that they didn't have time, and the timeline wasn't there for them. But that was an untrue statement, and so it wasn't an issue then. Well, John and you guys made it wasn't an issue. Because the person had gotten a personal email from a commission member the very night that we met and started the process.
Do you
So
think
they
you
had-
needed all the public hearings that you had scheduled?
I'm sorry?
Did you think that you needed to have all the public hearings that were mandated?
Well, the first time, we had 13 applicants. So the first public hearing, we had everybody there. The second public hearing, we had narrowed it down to a lower number. So it was like, okay, this is like the semifinals. And then afterwards, then we had discussion as far as to the candidates we were going to send to the council. The second time, we only had two applicants. Now, that might be an issue that you could address. If there's less than 3 or 4, whatever number you all come up with, that you don't have to have the second meeting.
Maybe to simplify it, Mr. Taylor, I'm guessing the language probably says shall, that we could just simply change the language to may have 2 public hearings, and that way it isn't going to be required.
I'll look at it, I don't know right offhand.
I'm guessing that it might be the terminology to shortcut it, is to just change it from shall hold a public hearing to may hold a public hearing. That'll give you the flexibility.
It's a good idea.
Because
Unless it's,
the meeting where we announced who we were going to actually bring forward, I think we had 6 people.
The other question is, again, coming back to, are we going to keep this in the hands of a reduced number of commission members, or are we going to put this in the hands of the council? Mr. Brumley's suggestion was that you have 5 districts, you might have 5 commissioners, or 7.
Well,
That's something for the council to decide whether we want to stay with the commission process, just change that, or whether we want the council to take on the responsibility.
Well,
How many do we currently have?
That's what we just.
Would you, well, I was going to ask too, on number 1, is that still up in the air?
That was number 1 that we just
Do you want to discuss that further at another meeting to decide whether you even want to have a commission? And
Right.
of course, Mr. Holloway's not here.
I just say we discuss,
Yeah,
we made these suggested changes, but we can still massage these. We're still going to have this again.
I understand. I just thought maybe somebody wanted to revisit whether we got a little more specific on whether it's a commission decision or a council decision.
Well-
If we decide to choose a commission, I think, like Mr. Brumley says, we should limit it to 5 and 1 person from each district.
Yeah.
We don't need the 2 at large. That may complicate it more.
Okay, so something to think about before the next, I guess, work session is going to be, I think we've resolved a lot of Mr. Taylor's questions really well. So the only thing we have left on the table is whether we go to a 5-member commission or whether we go to a council appointment, okay? So we think about that for the next work
Or
session.
both.
Now, you mean the council
Situation.
appointment as far as the whole process, or you mean a council appointment as far as the commission that you put together?
Yeah, you did bring up a good point there. God. See, I'm thinking about the appointment process for the Board of Education member. We haven't even touched on the appointment process for the commissioners.
Well, if you go to the 5-person commission, 1 from each district, I assume they would be appointed by the council. I mean, that would be
And
certainly.
reappointments are simple enough in the process, right? If there's a member of the commission that needs to be replaced.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's a vacancy on the nominating commission, yes, then the council would fill that vacancy. Yeah.
Okay.
But would you still have to put in there that there is a process if a member from a district doesn't attend the meetings? For
Hopefully that
replacement?
won't be a real, yeah, I can appreciate that. Hopefully that won't be an issue, though. It won't be so prolonged a measure.
Well, I think if we're
Plus
all
you-
appointing someone from our district,
Be more accountability,
there'd be much more accountability.
yeah. And plus your quorum would be a little bit easier to deal with, I think.
Can
So-
be.
so
Less
even-
people can be worse.
And honestly, and like Nicole says, if that person's constantly not there, you may want to talk to the council person and say, hey, what's going on?
Get you appointed.
Okay?
Sounds good.
I'm so glad you took the time to come.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. I do have one question before you leave. Did you guys take minutes of any of your meetings?
Every meeting.
Okay, and are they posted anywhere?
We weren't asked to have them posted. but,
Okay, so who could we contact if they wanted to get a copy of the minutes? Do you know?
Chris Gosnell.
Chris Gosnell, okay.
She was the secretary. The very first meeting, we elected a chair, and which was myself, and we elected a secretary. And Chris kept minutes of the meetings, attendance. So that was all part of the record that she keeps.
Okay, thank you.
And
We should probably post those minutes.
we weren't asked to publish any minutes of our meetings, because then it comes into a play of when we start discussing people, what goes in the minutes and what don't. And when you're talking about, individuals and what's on their application, then that's something that, you'd have to, we decided that wouldn't be part of the minutes. On other boards that I've been on, or in other committees, that was always a no-no. There is an, let me see, I had it right there on tip, but,
That's fine, they can request the minutes from Ms.
Yeah, someone
Cosnell
had
if
asked
she
me
wants
about the
them.
minutes, so
She just
I
wanted to know if you had minutes.
Could I suggest, Mr. Cannon, maybe at the next meeting where we discuss this further, we just focus on that number one point, and then we'll go from there. I mean, I think Mr. Hastings is right. The November 1st is kind of a goal, let's call it that. Doesn't have to be then, but I think we still need to keep moving because we want to get it introduced on both sides. And who knows, I mean, there still can be questions once you get to Annapolis on it.
they told me to-
So that would be my thought, to focus on one, and, I mean, we can fill in the blanks on the rest of them. I think we've gone over it pretty much.
Okay, that's fine. For whoever needs the minutes, then you have access, you have the name, got it.
Yes, yes.
All right, Mr. Brumman.
all right, thank you.
Very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
You all have a great day.
You too,
too.
thanks
Thank you.
again. The final item on the open work session is the letter to the comptroller. I'm hoping everyone's had a chance to review that.
Yeah, and I'll try to make this quick. I mean, I'll put the letter, this comment has nothing to do with the content of the letter. I simply think we should not be sending a letter. A letter is what started this. The response letter is what fueled it more. And I'm actually a little shocked at the fact that we're talking about a letter. It's just, we're the legislative body of Wicomico County. We need to focus, like we've been doing today, on our legislative responsibilities, and we don't need to become part of this letter exchange. So it's
I
not a
kinda
question of it's a good
agree.
letter or bad letter, it's
I
just.
think you said enough at the beginning of
Exactly,
the
right,
meeting.
right, right. You
Yeah,
made
that was
good
good.
opening comments. Let's leave it there, and
Purpose of the letter is to try to repair the damage between the.
you're not gonna
between-
repair it. I mean, the
No,
damage has
let me
long
finish.
been done.
Let me finish. I'm
So-
just saying that, we don't know what the comptroller is thinking. I think the purpose of the letter is just simply to try to reinforce to him that, hey, Wicomico County still, appreciates what you did, the fact that you went to great lengths to try to salvage this festival.
Yeah, we all read the letter.
Understand that.
I'm not debating.
Well, you're
one thing,
debating,
I'm not
you're
that.
debating the purpose of the letter. I'm just trying to say,
No, I'm not debating writing a letter. I'll say it again.
I thought you said you didn't want to send a letter.
I do not want to send a letter.
I don't either.
Well, that's why I'm telling you you should.
Right. Well, I hear
I
there's-
think.
I understand this is the debate, I know, I'm not taking a vote yet, I'm trying to say that the reason the letter is being suggested is because there's a concern that we want to make sure and reemphasize to the comptroller that not all of Wicomico County is against this man.
And you can contact,
I
any one of
believe
us can contact.
if you
Mr.
called
Cranston.
the comptroller,
I think
he'd
they
be
know
more than willing to
exactly
talk to you.
Who's
Right.
involved and who stirred this.
Yeah.
And I believe they don't think it's us.
All right,
Because once you read his response, he had nothing to say about the council.
The
He was
comptroller is
right
very
back to
personable.
I understand, I just didn't see any harm in sending a letter.
And I think we should be trying to fight
I
this.
do agree with Bill on that.
All
You
right.
want to have a vote?
Well, I can tell from Josh,
No, I would just say, given the back and forth, I think the way things have played out, there's no need for us to jump into it. I think you did a good job at the opening of the meeting
Yeah,
to
thank you.
set it
Yeah,
straight.
you're-
And
that was good
I think as a whole,
all right, well, I don't agree with any of it, but okay.
but I appreciate it.
I'm sure the comptroller's already heard about it.
All right, that's good, no problem. So it keeps us from having to worry about one more thing.
Yes.
Entertain a motion to adjourn so we can go to administrative closed session.
So moved.
Second,
Moved.